The dust cloud rising behind the single horse and rider appeared first as a mirage in the shimmering heat of the August afternoon. But Ethan Quincy knew better than to dismiss anything approaching his ranch in the Wyoming territory as imagination. He set down the fence post he had been measuring and wiped the sweat from his brow, squinting against the glare of the sun that beat down mercilessly on the prairie grasslands surrounding his property near the small settlement of Rawhide. The year was 1878, and out here a man learned quickly to pay attention to visitors, whether they came with good intentions or bad. As the rider drew closer, Ethan could make out more details. The horse was lathered with sweat, its sides heaving with exertion, and the rider sat hunched forward in the saddle as though every movement caused pain. Something was wrong. He left his tools where they lay and strode toward the main house, his long legs covering the distance quickly. By the time he reached the front porch, the rider had made it through the open gate of his property and was heading straight for the house with single-minded determination. When the horse finally came to a stop in front of his porch, Ethan felt his breath catch in his throat. The rider was a woman, and even beneath the layer of dust that covered her clothes and face, he could see the vivid purple bruise that encircled her left eye, swollen nearly shut. Her lip was split, and there were finger-shaped marks on her throat that made his blood run cold with anger at whoever had done this to her. She tried to dismount, but her legs gave way, and Ethan moved without thinking, catching her before she could hit the ground. She flinched at his touch, a small sound of fear escaping her lips, and he immediately loosened his grip while still supporting her weight. "Easy now," he said softly, keeping his voice calm and steady. "You are safe. I am not going to hurt you." Her eyes, one brown and clear, the other barely visible through the swelling, searched his face desperately. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse and cracked from what must have been hours of riding through the dry heat. "He is coming. He will find me. He said he would kill me this time." Ethan felt something fierce and protective flare to life in his chest. He had always prided himself on being a reasonable man, slow to anger and quick to see both sides of any situation, but looking at this woman's battered face, he felt a rage unlike anything he had ever experienced. He also felt something else, something he could not quite name, a pull toward her that went beyond simple compassion for someone in need. "He will not find you here," Ethan said firmly, his blue eyes meeting her frightened gaze. "I give you my word. Whatever he is, whoever he is, he goes through me first." The woman sagged against him, and he realized she was on the verge of collapse. He scooped her up into his arms, noting with concern how light she felt, as though she had not eaten properly in days or perhaps weeks. She did not protest this time, merely rested her head against his shoulder with a shuddering sigh that spoke of exhaustion and relief in equal measure. Ethan carried her into his house, kicking the door open with his boot. The interior was simple but clean, a testament to the orderly life he had built for himself after leaving behind the chaos of his youth, spent following cattle drives up and down the frontier. He had built this ranch with his own two hands, every fence post and roof beam a declaration of his determination to make something lasting and good. He laid her carefully on his bed, the only real piece of furniture he had bothered to invest money in, and went to fetch water and clean cloths. When he returned, her one good eye was closed, but he could tell from her breathing that she was not truly asleep, merely resting with the wary awareness of someone who had learned not to let down their guard completely. "I need to clean those cuts," he said gently. "May I?" She opened her eye and studied him for a long moment before giving a small nod. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed and began carefully dabbing at the split on her lip. She winced but did not pull away, and he worked as quickly and gently as he could. "What is your name?" he asked softly. "Olivia," she whispered. "Olivia Anderson." "Olivia," he repeated, liking the way it sounded. "I am Ethan Quincy. This ranch is mine, all 200 acres of it, and while you are here, you are under my protection." "You do not understand," Olivia said, her voice trembling. "Frank, he is not like other men. He is mean, really mean, and when he decides he wants something, he does not let go. He will come looking for me." "Let him come," Ethan said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "Out here, a man's word is his bond, and I gave you mine. Besides, I have dealt with mean men before. I am not easily intimidated." He continued tending to her injuries, his touch careful and respectful. As he worked, he noticed other things, the way her hands were roughened from hard work, the mended patches on her dress that had been sewn with neat, precise stitches, the way she held herself even in pain with a kind of dignity that spoke of inner strength. She was beautiful, he realized, though he felt guilty for noticing such a thing given her current state. Her hair, once freed from its braid, would probably fall in dark waves past her shoulders, and her features, even swollen and bruised, were delicate and well-formed. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Olivia seemed to have to think about this. "Yesterday morning, I think. Maybe the day before. I have been riding since I got away from him." Ethan set aside the bloodied cloths and stood. "Rest here. I will bring you something. My cooking is nothing special, but it will fill your stomach." He left her in the bedroom and went to his small kitchen, stoking the fire in the stove and putting together a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and the stew he had made the previous evening. As he worked, his mind raced. He knew he had just invited trouble onto his property, but he could not have done otherwise. The thought of turning away someone in need went against everything he believed in, everything his mother had taught him before she passed, when he was just 16. When he returned with a tray of food, Olivia had managed to sit up, though the effort clearly cost her. She looked at the food with undisguised hunger, and Ethan felt another surge of anger at this Frank, whoever he was. "What kind of man treated a woman this way? Eat slowly," he advised. "Your stomach may not be ready for too much at once." Olivia nodded and began to eat, and Ethan was pleased to see some color return to her cheeks as she did. While she ate, he pulled up a chair and sat where she could see him clearly, not wanting to make her nervous by hovering but wanting to be close enough if she needed anything. "You want to tell me what happened?" he asked after a few minutes. "You do not have to, but sometimes it helps to talk about these things." Olivia set down her spoon and wrapped her arms around herself. "Frank Dixon was my husband," she said quietly. "We married 2 years ago in Kansas. He seemed kind at first, or at least I thought he did. My father had died the year before, and I had no other family, no way to support myself. When Frank offered marriage, I thought it was an answer to prayer." She laughed bitterly, and the sound cut Ethan to the core. "I was so foolish. The kindness was an act, something he used to trap me. Once we were married and far from anyone I knew, the real Frank showed himself. He drank heavily, and when he drank, he became violent. The first time he hit me, he cried afterwards and swore it would never happen again. I wanted to believe him. But it did happen again," Ethan said softly. "Again and again," Olivia confirmed, her voice breaking. "Each time worse than the last. He broke my arm once, and I could not use it properly for months. He would lock me in our cabin for days at a time with no food, telling me I needed to learn obedience. I thought about leaving, but where could I go? I had no money, no horse of my own. He controlled everything." Ethan felt his hands clench into fists, and he had to consciously relax them. "What changed? How did you get away?" 3 days ago, he came home drunk and angry about something. "He beat me worse than he ever had before, and I truly thought he was going to kill me. He told me he was tired of me, that I was worthless, and that he should just get rid of me and find a new wife. Then he passed out from the whiskey. Olivia's voice grew stronger as she continued, a note of fierce pride entering it. I knew this was my only chance. I took the money he kept hidden in a jar, not much, just a few dollars. I took his horse, the fastest one we had, and I rode. I did not know where I was going, just away. I have been riding for 3 days straight, stopping only when the horse needed rest. I saw your ranch and I just hoped, prayed, that whoever lived here might help me. You did the right thing, Ethan assured her. And you are safe now. I meant what I said. He will not find you here, but if he does, he will wish he had not. Olivia looked at him with an expression that was part hope, part disbelief. You do not know Frank. He is dangerous. So am I when I need to be, Ethan replied quietly. I did not always live a peaceful life, Miss Anderson. Before I built this ranch, I spent years as a lawman in some of the roughest towns in the territory. I have faced down outlaws and gunfighters, men who would kill you as soon as look at you. I left that life behind because I wanted peace, but I have not forgotten how to handle trouble when it comes calling. This seemed to reassure Olivia somewhat, and she finished her meal in silence. When she was done, Ethan took the tray and stood. You need rest, real rest without fear. Sleep as long as you need. I will be outside working, but I will check on you regularly. Where will you sleep? Olivia asked suddenly. This is your bed. I have slept on harder surfaces than a floor, Ethan said with a slight smile. Do not worry about me, just focus on healing. Over the next few days, Ethan settled into a new routine. He continued his work on the ranch, mending fences, tending to his small herd of cattle and maintaining the property, but he kept the house in sight at all times, watching for any sign of trouble. Olivia rested, and as she did, the swelling around her eye began to subside, revealing the true extent of the bruising beneath. She slept for hours at a time, her body making up for what must have been months of poor rest and constant fear. When she was awake, Ethan brought her meals and they talked. He learned that she was 22 years old, born in Missouri to parents who had tried their luck at farming in Kansas. She had received some education in a small schoolhouse, learning to read and write and do figures, skills she had hoped might lead to work as a teacher before her father's death had derailed those plans. She loved books, though she had not been able to read one in the 2 years since her marriage to Frank, who considered such things frivolous and a waste of time. I have some books, Ethan told her. Not many, but a few. When you are feeling better, you are welcome to read any of them. The look of joy on Olivia's face at this simple offer made Ethan's heart clench. How little kindness she must have known these past years, if such a small gesture could bring her such happiness. On the 4th day, Olivia insisted on getting out of bed. I cannot just lie here forever, she said when Ethan protested. You have been so kind, taking me in, feeding me, but I do not want to be a burden. Let me help with something, anything. Ethan could see the determination in her eyes and knew better than to argue. Besides, he understood the need to feel useful, to contribute rather than simply accept charity. All right, he agreed, but nothing too strenuous. You are still healing. They compromised. Olivia took over the cooking, which was a relief to Ethan, who had never developed much skill in that area despite years of living alone. She also began tending to the small vegetable garden behind the house that Ethan had planted but largely neglected, too busy with other ranch work to give it proper attention. Working alongside her, even in these simple domestic tasks, felt natural in a way that surprised Ethan. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten what it was like to share space with another person, to have someone to talk to over meals, to hear another voice in the house at the end of a long day. But more than that, he found himself drawn to Olivia in ways that went beyond simple companionship. She was intelligent and quick-witted, with a dry sense of humor that emerged as she began to feel safer. She was kind, fussing over his horse and the few chickens he kept with genuine affection. And she was strong, far stronger than she probably realized, to have survived what she had endured and still be capable of laughter and hope. Ethan found himself watching her when he thought she was not looking, noticing the way the afternoon sun caught in her dark hair, the graceful movement of her hands as she worked, the small smile that played at the corners of her mouth when she was pleased with something. He tried to tell himself that these feelings were inappropriate, that she was vulnerable and under his protection, that she needed a friend and protector, not a man looking at her with romantic interest. But his heart seemed not to care about these logical arguments. For her part, Olivia found herself increasingly aware of Ethan. She noticed the care with which he treated his animals, speaking softly to them as he worked. She saw the way he checked on her throughout the day, never intrusively but always making sure she had what she needed. She appreciated his quiet strength, so different from Frank's loud, violent dominance. Ethan's power was controlled, purposeful, used to build and protect rather than to hurt and destroy. She also noticed, though she tried not to, how handsome he was. At 28, he was in the prime of his life, tall and strongly built from years of hard work. His hair was dark blonde, sun-streaked from long hours outdoors, and his blue eyes held a kindness that made her feel safe in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. When he smiled at her, which he did more often as the days passed, she felt something flutter in her chest, a feeling she had thought Frank had beaten out of her forever. It was dangerous to feel this way, she told herself. She was still married, even if it was a marriage she wished with all her heart had never happened. And even if she were not, what could she offer a man like Ethan? She was damaged, broken, afraid of her own shadow at times. He deserved better than a woman with a violent husband hunting her, better than someone who flinched at sudden movements and woke from nightmares in the middle of the night. But despite her fears and doubts, the connection between them continued to grow. It was there in the comfortable silences they shared while working side by side, in the long conversations they had over evening meals, in the way their eyes would meet across the room and hold for just a moment too long. 2 weeks after Olivia's arrival, trouble came to the Quincy ranch. Ethan was working in the stable when he heard the sound of horses approaching. He moved to the door and felt his body tense as he saw 3 men riding up to the house. The man in the lead was big and rough-looking, with a cruel set to his mouth that Ethan recognized from his years as a lawman. This was a man who enjoyed inflicting pain. Olivia had been in the garden, but she must have heard the horses too. She appeared at the corner of the house, took one look at the riders and went white. Her hand flew to her mouth to stifle a cry, and Ethan knew without being told that the man in the lead was Frank Dixon. Ethan strode quickly to the house, positioning himself between Olivia and the approaching riders. "Get inside," he said quietly to her. "Stay away from the windows." "Ethan, no," Olivia whispered, her voice shaking. "You do not understand. He will kill you. He can try," Ethan replied calmly. "Now go inside." Olivia hesitated for just a moment, then fled into the house. Ethan waited on the porch as the 3 men reined in their horses a few yards away. Up close, Frank Dixon was even more unpleasant than he had appeared from a distance. His face was florid, his eyes bloodshot, and he carried himself with the aggressive posture of a bully used to getting his way through intimidation and violence. "Well now," Frank said, his voice carrying a mocking tone, "you must be the fool who has been harboring my wife." "I do not see a wife here," Ethan replied evenly. "Just a woman seeking refuge from a violent man." Frank's face darkened. That woman is mine, legally married before God and witnesses. She stole from me and ran off with my horse. Now I am here to collect what belongs to me. Women are not property, Ethan said, his voice hard. And from what I understand, you forfeited any right to call yourself a husband when you used your wife as a punching bag. What goes on between a man and his wife is none of your concern, Frank snarled. He started to dismount, but Ethan's next words stopped him. Take one more step onto my property without an invitation and it becomes my concern. This is private land and you are trespassing. I suggest you turn around and ride back the way you came. Frank laughed, an ugly sound. You think I am afraid of you? There are 3 of us and 1 of you. I am aware of the numbers, Ethan said calmly. His hand rested near the gun at his hip, not threatening but ready. What you should be aware of is that I was a deputy marshal for 5 years in Cheyenne and Laramie. I have faced down worse men than you and I am still here. They are not. Think carefully about your next move. The 2 men with Frank exchanged uneasy glances. They had clearly expected an easy confrontation, perhaps an intimidated homesteader who would hand over Olivia without protest. Ethan's calm confidence and revealed background as a lawman had shifted the situation into something they had not bargained for. Frank, however, was too angry and too convinced of his own dominance to back down. I do not care if you were marshal of the whole damn territory, he spat. That is my wife in there and I am taking her home. No, Ethan said simply. You are not. The tension stretched taut as a wire. Ethan could see Frank weighing his options, trying to decide if his pride was worth getting into a gunfight with someone who clearly knew how to handle himself. For a moment, Ethan thought it might go badly, that Frank's rage would override his sense of self-preservation. Then, from inside the house, Olivia's voice rang out clear and strong. I am not going with you, Frank. Not now, not ever. You can leave on your own, or the marshal can make you leave, but I am done being afraid of you. Frank's face turned an alarming shade of red. You ungrateful witch, he shouted. After everything I did for you, taking you in when you had nothing, giving you a home, and this is how you repay me. By running off with some other man. You mean after you beat me nearly to death? Olivia called back, her voice shaking but determined. After you starved me and locked me away and made every day a living hell. I do not owe you gratitude, Frank. I do not owe you anything. I will kill you. Frank roared, finally dismounting and starting toward the house. I will kill you both. Ethan drew his gun in one smooth motion, the weapon appearing in his hand as though by magic. The click of the hammer being cocked was loud in the sudden silence. That is far enough, he said, and there was no friendliness left in his voice now, only cold authority. You have made threats against someone under my protection. That gives me legal right to defend her by any means necessary. In fact, if I shoot you right now, most judges in this territory would call it justified. Frank stopped, his hand hovering near his own gun. He was drunk enough to be stupid, but not quite drunk enough to draw on someone who already had him covered. The 2 men with him had made no move to help him, clearly wanting no part of this fight. This is not over, Frank said, his voice thick with rage and humiliation. You hear me? This is not over. If you come back here it will be, Ethan promised, and you will not like how it ends. Now get off my property before I decide to hold you for the sheriff. For a long moment, Frank stood there, quivering with impotent fury. Then he spat in the dirt, turned on his heel and stalked back to his horse. The 3 men rode off, Frank's curses carrying back on the wind. Ethan did not lower his gun or relax his stance until they were out of sight. Even then, he remained vigilant, knowing that men like Frank Dixon rarely gave up so easily. When he finally turned back to the house, he found Olivia standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "You stood up to him," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "All this time I thought he was unstoppable, that no one could stand against him. But you did." Ethan holstered his gun and climbed the porch steps. Without thinking, he pulled Olivia into his arms and she came willingly, burying her face against his chest. He could feel her shaking, the adrenaline and fear catching up with her now that the immediate danger had passed. "I told you," he murmured into her hair. "He goes through me first. And I do not go down easy." They stood like that for several minutes, and Ethan became aware of how perfectly she fit against him, how right it felt to hold her. When Olivia finally pulled back, she looked up at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you risk your life for me? You do not even know me." Ethan reached up and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "I know enough," he said. "I know you are brave and strong. I know you deserve better than what he gave you. And I know that in the 2 weeks you have been here, you have become important to me, more important than I probably should admit." Olivia's breath caught. "Ethan, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know the timing is terrible and you have been through so much. I just wanted you to know why I will keep standing between you and him, why I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Because I care about you, Olivia, more than I have cared about anyone in a very long time." "I care about you too," Olivia whispered. "I've tried not to, tried to tell myself it is too soon, that I am too broken for this, but I do. When you look at me, I feel like maybe I could be whole again someday. When you smile at me, I remember what it is like to be happy. And when you held me just now, I felt safer than I have felt in years." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, mindful of the fading bruises. "You are not broken," he said firmly. "You are bent maybe, but not broken. And given time and care, even bent things can heal straight and strong again." The kiss, when it came, was gentle and sweet, nothing like the rough, dominating kisses Frank had forced on her. Ethan's lips touched her softly, asking rather than demanding, and Olivia felt something tight and painful in her chest begin to loosen. When they parted, they were both smiling. "We should probably go inside," Ethan said, "just in case he decides to come back with more men." "Do you think he will? Men like him do not like to lose," Ethan said honestly. "We need to be cautious." That night, Ethan did not sleep. He sat in a chair by the window, his rifle across his lap, watching the darkness for any sign of movement. Olivia tried to convince him to rest, but he refused. "I have gone without sleep before," he told her. "I will be fine." As dawn broke over the prairie with no sign of Frank Dixon's return, Ethan allowed himself to relax slightly. Perhaps the man had been more coward than he appeared, all bluster and no real courage when faced with genuine resistance. But Ethan knew better than to let down his guard completely. The next day he rode into Rawhide, the small settlement about 5 miles from his ranch. It consisted of little more than a general store, a saloon, a livery stable, and a handful of other buildings, but it served as the center of the scattered ranching community in the area. More importantly, it was where the local law, such as it was, could be found. Sheriff Tom Harrison was an older man, grizzled and weathered by decades on the frontier, but still sharp and capable. He listened to Ethan's story with a grave expression, occasionally nodding or asking a clarifying question. "I remember you from your martial days," Harrison said when Ethan had finished. "You had a good reputation. If you say this Dixon fellow is trouble, I believe you." "The question is, what can we do about it?" Ethan asked. "She is still legally his wife, even though she has every moral right to leave him." Harrison sighed and rubbed his weathered face. "That is the problem, is it not? The law sees a man's wife as his responsibility, and it gives him broad rights over her. Even with evidence of abuse, Most judges would tell her to go back to her husband and be more obedient. That is not acceptable, Ethan said flatly. I agree with you, but the law is the law, Harrison replied. However, there might be a way around it. If she could prove her life was in immediate danger, if there were witnesses willing to testify to Dixon's violence and threats, a judge might grant a divorce on grounds of cruelty. It is rare, but it has been done. How long would that take? Months, maybe longer, Harrison admitted. Judges only come through this territory a few times a year, and building a case takes time. In the meantime, your Miss Anderson would need to stay hidden and safe. She can stay at my ranch as long as she needs, Ethan said without hesitation. But what about Dixon? If he comes back with more men, tries to take her by force? If he sets foot on your property without your permission, you have every right to defend it, Harrison said. Just make sure you have witnesses if it comes to shooting. I do not want to see you hang because you could not prove self-defense. Ethan thanked the sheriff and made a few purchases at the general store, including fabric that he thought Olivia might use to make herself a new dress, some books he found on a dusty shelf, and various supplies. As he was loading his purchases onto his horse, he overheard two men talking outside the saloon. I heard Dixon lost his woman, one said. Run off and he cannot find her. Serves the mean bastard right, the other replied. Everyone knows how he treated her. Saw him backhand her across the face in broad daylight once, and when I asked if maybe he should not do that, he threatened to shoot me. You think she is really gone for good? I hope so, for her sake. Though I would not want to be whoever is hiding her if Dixon finds out. He has been drinking heavy and talking about what he is going to do when he catches up with her. It is not pretty. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just mounted his horse and headed back to the ranch. The conversation confirmed what he had suspected. Frank Dixon was not going to let this go easily. When he arrived home, he found Olivia in the garden, a basket of vegetables at her feet, and a look of peace on her face that he hated to disturb. But she needed to know what he had learned. Over dinner that evening, he told her about his conversation with the sheriff and what he had overheard in town. Olivia listened quietly, her expression growing troubled. I have brought so much trouble to your door, she said when he finished. Maybe I should leave, go somewhere else, somewhere farther away where Frank could not find me. No, Ethan said firmly. Running will not solve anything. He found you once, he could find you again. Better to deal with this here where you have protection and we can build a case against him. But it could take months, Olivia protested. I cannot stay here that long living off your charity. It is not charity, Ethan said. You earn your keep with the cooking and the garden work and a dozen other ways, but more than that I want you here. Not out of obligation or duty, but because I enjoy your company. Because you make this house feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep between work. Olivia looked down at her plate, a flush rising in her cheeks. You have been so good to me, Ethan, better than I deserve. You deserve far more than what you have gotten from life, Ethan countered. You deserve kindness and respect and safety. You deserve to be cherished, not beaten. And if you will let me, I would like to be the one to show you that. What are you saying? Olivia asked, though her tone suggested she knew exactly what he was saying. I am saying that I am falling in love with you, Ethan said simply. I know it is too soon. I know you are still healing from what he did to you, and I know the timing could not be worse, but I cannot help what I feel. You have gotten under my skin, Olivia Anderson, and I do not want you to leave. When this is all over, when you are free of him legally as well as physically, I want you to stay here. Not as a guest or a refugee, but as my wife, if you will have me. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of pain or fear. I think I am falling in love with you too, she admitted. It terrifies me because the last time I trusted a man, I ended up in a nightmare I could not wake up from. But you are not like him. You have shown me over and over again that you are nothing like him. Yes, Ethan. When I am free, when this is truly over, I will stay. I will be your wife. Ethan stood and came around the table, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. They kissed again, longer and deeper this time, a promise and a commitment sealed between them. When they parted, both were smiling through their tears. "We will get through this," Ethan promised. Together. The next few weeks passed in a strange mixture of tension and happiness. They lived constantly on guard, watching for any sign of Frank Dixon's return, but they also grew closer, learning the small details of each other's lives and personalities. Ethan discovered that Olivia sang while she worked, soft melodies that made him stop what he was doing just to listen. Olivia learned that Ethan was afraid of nothing except the possibility of losing the people he cared about, a fear born from watching his mother die when he was too young to help her. They worked together on the ranch, and Ethan taught Olivia how to handle a rifle, insisting that she needed to be able to defend herself if he was not there. She proved a quick study, her hand steady and her eye keen. The confidence that came with knowing she could protect herself if needed seemed to heal something in her. And Ethan watched her stand a little taller, speak a little stronger. One evening, about a month after her arrival, they sat together on the porch watching the sun set over the prairie. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the light turning the grasslands to gold. Olivia leaned against Ethan's shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "I never thought I could feel this way again," Olivia said softly. "Happy, I mean, safe. Looking forward to tomorrow instead of dreading it." "You deserve to feel this way every day," Ethan replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You think Frank will come back?" she asked. "Honestly, I do not know. Sheriff Harrison has not heard anything about him in town lately. He might have given up and moved on, or he might be biding his time, waiting for us to let our guard down." "I hate living in this limbo," Olivia admitted, "not knowing if I am truly free or if he is just waiting to strike." "I know," Ethan said, "but Sheriff Harrison is working on your case. He has been collecting statements from people who witnessed Frank's violence toward you. It is slow work, but it is progress." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Then Olivia turned to look up at Ethan, her expression serious. "What if we cannot get the divorce?" she asked. "What if no judge will grant it and I am tied to him forever by law even if I never see him again? What then?" "Then we will figure something else out," Ethan said firmly. "There are territories out west where the law has a lighter touch, places we could go where no one would question if you are really my wife or not. I would rather have you without the blessing of the law than not have you at all. You would do that for me. Leave your ranch, everything you have built here." "Olivia, this ranch was always just wood and land and cattle," Ethan said, turning to face her fully. "It is a good life, but it is not what makes me happy. You are what makes me happy. Where you go, I go. If we have to start over somewhere else, then that is what we will do." Olivia kissed him then, pouring all her gratitude and love into it. When they parted, both were breathing hard, and Ethan had to remind himself sternly that she was not yet truly free, that they needed to wait and do things properly, no matter how much he wanted her. 2 months after Olivia's arrival, Sheriff Harrison rode out to the ranch with news. A judge was coming through Rawhide in 2 weeks, and he had agreed to hear Olivia's petition for divorce. The sheriff had compiled statements from multiple witnesses who had seen Frank's abuse, and there were enough to build a solid case. "There are no guarantees," Harrison warned. "Judge Matthews is a fair man, but he is also traditional. He does not like seeing marriages dissolved. You will need to testify, Miss Anderson, and it will not be easy. Dixon's lawyer, if he bothers to hire one, will try to make you look like the guilty party." "I will do whatever it takes," Olivia said firmly. "I want to be free of him, legally and completely." The 2 weeks before the hearing were tense. They traveled into Rawhide the day before, taking rooms at the small boarding house that served as the town's hotel. Ethan insisted on staying close, taking the room right next to Olivia's, and she was grateful for his presence. The hearing took place in the general store, which had the only room large enough to accommodate a proper court. Judge Matthews was a stern-looking man with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Frank Dixon was there, looking sullen and angry, with a rough lawyer beside him who clearly had more experience with property disputes than matrimonial law. Olivia took the stand, her hands trembling but her voice steady as she recounted the abuse she had suffered. She described beatings in detail that made several people in the room gasp, showed the scars on her arms where Frank had burned her with cigars, testified to the times he had locked her away without food or water. Sheriff Harrison presented the statements from witnesses, and several people in town came forward to add their own observations of Frank's cruelty. Frank's lawyer tried to paint Olivia as a disobedient wife who had driven her husband to discipline through her own failings, but his arguments fell flat in the face of the overwhelming evidence. Even Judge Matthews, traditional though he might be, looked disgusted as the extent of Frank's abuse became clear. When it came time for Frank to testify, he was belligerent and defensive, claiming that he had only been trying to teach his wife proper behavior, that women needed a firm hand to keep them in line. His words condemned him more thoroughly than any witness could have. In the end, Judge Matthews deliberated for less than an hour. When he returned, his expression was grave, but his verdict was clear. It is the finding of this court that the marriage between Frank Dixon and Olivia Anderson is dissolved on grounds of extreme cruelty and endangerment of life, he pronounced. Miss Anderson is hereby restored to her maiden name and status, free of any legal obligation to her former husband. Furthermore, it is the order of this court that Frank Dixon is to have no contact with the former Miss Anderson, and should he approach her or threaten her in any way, he will be subject to immediate arrest and imprisonment. Olivia felt as though she could not breathe. Free. She was truly free. Beside her, Ethan squeezed her hand, and when she looked at him, the joy and relief in his eyes mirrored her own. Frank exploded in rage, lunging toward Olivia with a roar of fury, but Sheriff Harrison and 2 deputies were ready. They wrestled him back, and the judge's gavel cracked down like a gunshot. "Mr. Dixon, you will control yourself or find yourself in jail for contempt," Judge Matthews said coldly. "You have brought this upon yourself through your own actions. This court is adjourned." As Frank was forcibly escorted from the building, still shouting threats and obscenities, Olivia turned to Ethan and burst into tears. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as she sobbed out years of fear and pain and finally, relief. "It is over," he murmured. "You are free. He can never hurt you again." "I cannot believe it," Olivia said through her tears. "I thought this day would never come." They left Rawhide that afternoon, eager to return to the ranch and put the whole ordeal behind them. As they rode together, side by side on their horses, Olivia felt lighter than she had in years, as though the weight she had been carrying had finally been lifted. That evening, back at the ranch, Ethan made a simple dinner while Olivia sat at the table watching him, still feeling slightly dazed by the day's events. When he set a plate in front of her, he knelt beside her chair and took her hand. "Olivia Anderson," he said formally, I asked you once before when you were still bound by law to another man. Now you are free, truly free, and I want to ask you properly. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, not out of necessity or protection, but because we choose each other freely?" "Yes," Olivia said without hesitation, laughing through fresh tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They married a month later in a small ceremony in Rawhide, with Sheriff Harrison standing as witness and the few neighbors from surrounding ranches in attendance. Olivia wore a new dress, cream-colored with delicate embroidery, that she had sewn herself from the fabric Ethan had bought months ago. She had never looked more beautiful, and as Ethan slipped a simple gold ring on her finger, he felt his heart swell with a happiness he had never imagined possible. The first months of their marriage were a revelation to Olivia. She had thought she understood what marriage could be, watching her parents' affectionate partnership as a child, but experiencing it herself was different. Ethan was patient and gentle, always making sure she was comfortable, never pushing her beyond what she was ready for. When nightmares woke her in the middle of the night, he was there to hold her and remind her that she was safe. When old fears reared up unexpectedly, triggered by a raised voice or a sudden movement, he gave her space to work through them while making sure she knew he was there if she needed him. Slowly, carefully, Olivia healed. The physical scars faded, and the emotional ones, while never completely disappearing, became less painful. She learned to laugh freely again, to speak her mind without fear of reprisal, to take joy in simple things like a perfect sunset or a well-made meal. She learned what it meant to be loved by a good man, and she loved him back with all the fierce intensity of someone who had nearly lost the capacity for love entirely. Together, they worked the ranch, building it from a modest operation into something substantial. Olivia proved to have a head for figures and business, keeping their accounts and helping Ethan make decisions about when to buy and sell cattle. She also started a small business of her own, baking bread and pies to sell in town, something that gave her independence and purpose beyond the ranch work. A year after their marriage, Olivia realized she was pregnant. The discovery brought a mixture of joy and fear. She wanted Ethan's child desperately, but she was terrified by the memory of being helpless and vulnerable, of not being able to protect herself. What if something went wrong? What if she could not be a good mother after everything she had been through? Ethan, as always, understood her fears without her having to explain them fully. "You are going to be an amazing mother," he told her, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "I have seen how you care for the animals, how you treat everyone with kindness and patience. Our child will be lucky to have you." "What if I am too afraid?" Olivia asked. "What if I cannot let them out of my sight, cannot stand to see them in any kind of pain because of what I went through?" "Then we will work through it together," Ethan promised. "Just like we have worked through everything else. You are not alone in this, Olivia. You will never be alone again." Their son was born on a cold February morning in 1880, delivered with the help of a midwife from town and Ethan, who refused to leave Olivia's side despite the midwife's suggestion that men usually waited elsewhere. It was a long, difficult labor, and there were moments when Olivia thought she could not continue, but Ethan's steady presence and encouragement pulled her through. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Olivia wept with relief and joy. Ethan cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his own face as he looked at his wife and newborn son. They named him James, after Ethan's father, and from the moment he entered the world, he was loved beyond measure. Olivia's fears about being unable to mother properly proved unfounded. She was attentive without being smothering, protective without being paranoid. Watching her with their son, Ethan fell in love with her all over again, seeing the strength and resilience that had carried her through hell and brought her out the other side. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered. Their family grew happy and healthy, and the dark days of Olivia's first marriage began to feel like a distant nightmare rather than a recent reality. They heard through the grapevine that Frank Dixon had moved farther west, reportedly falling deeper into drink and violence, until he finally picked a fight with the wrong man and ended up on the wrong end of a gun. Neither Ethan nor Olivia mourned his passing. The news simply closed a chapter that had already ended for them. When James was 2, Olivia became pregnant again, and this time the experience was easier, colored by the knowledge of what to expect and the confidence that came from having successfully navigated it before. Their daughter, Anna, was born in the spring of 1882, a tiny thing with her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. As the years passed, Ethan and Olivia's love only deepened. They knew each other's rhythms and moods, could communicate with a glance across a crowded room, finished each other's sentences without thinking about it. They had built something real and lasting, a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, they would sit together on the porch as they had in those early days, watching the sun set over the prairie. Sometimes they talked about the future, making plans for the ranch and their growing family. Sometimes they reminisced about the past, though those memories of how they met grew less painful with each retelling, transformed by time and healing into simply the story of how they found each other. "You ever regret it?" Olivia asked one evening when James was 5 and Anna was 3. "Taking me in that day. Your life would have been so much simpler if you had just sent me on my way." Ethan looked at her in genuine surprise. "Regret it? Olivia, that was the luckiest day of my life. Yes, it brought complications and danger, but it also brought you. And you brought me more happiness than I ever imagined possible. How could I regret that?" "I just think sometimes about the risk you took," Olivia said. "Frank could have killed you, things could have gone so wrong. But they did not," Ethan pointed out. "And even if I had known exactly how difficult it would be, I would have made the same choice. Some things are worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. You were one of those things from the moment I saw you." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder, content. "I love you, Ethan Quincy." "I love you too, Olivia Quincy," he replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Every day for the rest of my life." As their children grew, Ethan and Olivia made sure to teach them the values that had sustained them through their own trials. James and Anna learned early the importance of treating others with kindness and respect, of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves, of the difference between strength and violence. They grew up knowing that their mother had survived terrible things, though the details were kept appropriately vague for their young years, and that their father had been willing to risk his life to protect someone in need. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Ethan expanded the cattle operation and began breeding horses as well, developing a reputation for quality stock that brought buyers from across the territory. Olivia's baking business expanded too, and eventually she began supplying several establishments in the growing town of Rawhide, which had transformed from a scattered settlement into a proper small town, as Wyoming moved toward statehood. When James was 10 and Anna was 8, Olivia discovered she was pregnant once more. This pregnancy was unexpected but welcomed, though at 34, Olivia felt every year of her age more than she had with the previous 2. Their third child, another son they named Matthew, was born in the fall of 1890, small but healthy and immediately adored by his older siblings. As Wyoming officially became a state that same year, Ethan and Olivia reflected on how much had changed since that hot August day in 1878, when a desperate woman on a lathered horse had appeared at Ethan's ranch seeking refuge. They had built a life together that exceeded anything either had imagined possible in those uncertain early days. They had created a family, a thriving business, a place of safety and love that stood as a testament to the power of second chances. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Ethan took Olivia back to the spot where he had first seen her riding up to the ranch. It was a mild spring day, the prairie grass waving in the breeze, the sky a brilliant blue overhead. Their children were being watched by a neighbor for the afternoon, giving them rare time alone. "You remember that day?" Ethan asked, his arm around Olivia's waist as they looked out over the land. "Every detail," Olivia replied. "I remember thinking this was my last hope, that if whoever lived here turned me away, I did not know what I would do. I was so afraid, so desperate. And then you caught me when I fell, and you looked at me with such kindness, and you said those words that changed everything." "He will not find you here," Ethan quoted softly. "And you were right," Olivia said, turning to face him. "He never did. You kept me safe when I could not keep myself safe. You gave me time to heal, space to become myself again. You loved me when I did not think I was capable of being loved. Everything good in my life now traces back to that day, to your willingness to help a stranger in trouble." "You were never just a stranger," Ethan said. "From the first moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you, like I had been waiting for you without knowing it." They kissed, a sweet meeting of lips that still sparked the same warmth and affection it had all those years ago. When they parted, both were smiling. 15 years, Olivia marveled. 15 years of marriage, and I love you more now than I did the day we wed. "That is because every day we choose each other again," Ethan replied. "Love is not just a feeling, it is a decision you make over and over. And I choose you, Olivia, today and every day for the rest of our lives." They stood there together, watching the sun slowly sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Around them, the ranch bustled with life, the sounds of cattle lowing, horses neighing, and in the distance, the laughter of their children playing. The years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their story. James grew into a serious young man with his father's steady temperament and his mother's sharp mind. At 18, he began taking on more responsibility for the ranch, showing a natural aptitude for both the physical work and the business decisions involved. Anna, at 16, had inherited her mother's fierce independence and her father's courage, and she shocked the local community by announcing her intention to attend the new state university in Laramie to study teaching. Matthew, at 8, was still young enough to see the world with wonder, spending his days exploring every corner of the ranch and asking endless questions about everything he encountered. Ethan and Olivia watched their children grow with pride and occasional pangs of nostalgia for the days when they were small. But they also found joy in seeing them become capable, independent individuals, knowing that they had succeeded in creating the kind of loving, stable home that Olivia had been denied in her first marriage. On quiet evenings, when the work was done and the children occupied with their own pursuits, Ethan and Olivia would still find their way to the porch, sitting together as they had done for decades now. Sometimes they talked, sharing thoughts and dreams and plans for the future. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, content in each other's presence. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Olivia asked one such evening. She was 50 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined by years of sun and wind and smiles. But to Ethan, she was as beautiful as the day he first saw her, If I had ridden past your ranch instead of stopping here, if you had turned me away, if Frank had caught up with me before I found safety, I try not to, Ethan admitted. His own hair had gone almost entirely gray, and his body bore the marks of a life of hard work, but his eyes were as clear and kind as ever. Those thoughts lead nowhere good. I would rather focus on what did happen, on the life we have built together. We have been lucky, Olivia said softly. Luck had something to do with it, Ethan agreed. But so did choice. You chose to fight for your freedom, I chose to help you. We both chose to take a chance on love when it would have been easier and safer to hold back. Those choices matter. Olivia reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining with the practiced ease of decades of marriage. I would make the same choices again, she said. Every single one. So would I, Ethan replied, bringing her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. As the sun set on another day at the Quincy ranch, painting the Wyoming sky in brilliant colors, Ethan and Olivia sat together in perfect contentment. They had weathered storms that would have destroyed lesser relationships, had built something strong and lasting from the ashes of pain and fear. Their love had been tested by violence, by uncertainty, by all the challenges that life on the frontier could throw at them, and it had not just survived but thrived. The ranch that Ethan had built alone was now truly a home, filled with the sounds and spirits of family. The woman who had arrived broken and terrified had become the heart of that home, her strength and resilience inspiring everyone around her. And the man who had offered protection to a stranger had found in return a love deeper and more fulfilling than he had ever imagined possible. They had started with a moment of crisis, with a battered woman on a tired horse and a cowboy who said 5 simple words that changed everything. He will not find you here. Those words had been a promise, one that Ethan had kept absolutely. But they had also been the beginning of something neither could have predicted. A love story that would span decades and create a legacy that would last for generations. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Wyoming sky, Ethan and Olivia finally rose and went inside, his arm around her waist, her head resting on his shoulder. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, as every day did. But they would face it together, as they had faced everything since that fateful August day so many years ago. The door closed behind them, and light glowed warmly from the windows of the ranch house, a beacon of safety and love on the wide prairie. Inside, a family gathered for the evening, sharing stories and laughter, building memories that would sustain them through whatever the future might hold. It had started with refuge offered and gratefully accepted. It had grown into a love that transformed 2 broken pieces into something whole and beautiful. And it would continue, this legacy of courage and compassion, passed down through the children and grandchildren yet to come, a testament to the power of choosing kindness, choosing bravery, and choosing love even when the world seemed dark and dangerous. Ethan and Olivia Quincy had found each other in the worst of circumstances, and built from that beginning the best of lives. Their story, born from pain but rooted in hope, would endure long after they themselves had passed, a reminder that sometimes the most profound love stories begin with the simplest act of human decency, one person offering shelter to another in their darkest hour. And as the years continued to roll by, as their children had children of their own and the ranch passed to the next generation, the story of how Ethan and Olivia met and fell in love would be told and retold, slightly different each time but always carrying the same essential truth. Love could heal even the deepest wounds. Courage could overcome even the most terrifying obstacles. And sometimes, in the vast wilderness of the frontier, Two souls could find each other against all odds and build something that would last forever. Their love had been tested by fire and emerged stronger, a bond forged in adversity and tempered by time into something unbreakable. And in the end, that was all that mattered: the love they had found, the life they had built, and the family they had created together on a ranch in Wyoming where once, long ago, a cowboy had offered sanctuary to a desperate woman and received in return a gift beyond price.